There are some stories you just won't believe unless you see them for yourself. Watch them unfold. This is one of those stories that folds and unfolds. See what I mean? Next on Independent Lens.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Independent Lens. I'm your host, Maggie Gyllenhaal. What does it take to turn a small piece of paper into this? Even if you never mastered making paper airplanes, it's possible to triumph in this art form. Folding paper squares will transform you and the world around you.
No cutting, no paste, no tape. Origami is a metamorphic art form. Origami, you've got that piece of paper and you don't add to it, you don't take away from it, you change it.
After abandoning her former work, independent producer Vanessa Gould felt a deep resonance with those who had forged unlikely careers as modern-day paper folders. A theoretical mathematician, an intrepid scientist, and 8 other artists who transformed 2 dimensions into 3. In our modern world, full of fast-moving, glittering technology, what is the never-ending fascination with a square piece of paper? Between the Folds, next on Independent Lens.
If you look around a room or out of the window and list how many things fold. You know, the obvious thing is this sweater, my shirt, the collar is folded, the skin here on my eye. If I talk to you or to the camera, then the air is folding, going into your ear. Even the galaxy is sort of wheeling around and, you know, folding itself over eons as it goes around. That looks like mountains and valleys for the reason that mountains and valleys go through the same process. Even DNA is folded. You know, you and I are born from folding.
What do you see when you look at a piece of paper? For most of us, we see numbers, pictures, words, maybe a good story if we're lucky. It's said that when Michelangelo stood before a block of marble, he could already see his statue waiting inside. Some might even say it was there all along. In a way, the same idea can describe paper folders. People who look at paper and see the makings of almost anything they can dream up in just a single square. There's sculptors and scientists working in the shadows between art and math, like alchemists bringing beauty to the mundane.
I think at heart, one of the things that makes us human, that's both our strength and our weakness, is a need to change things. It's also the heart of the appeal of origami, exploring the surprising magic of just how far you can change that square only by folding.
The rules are simple and intensify the challenge. One square transformed by folding. No scissors, no tape, no glue.
black suspended in water.
This is Michael Lafosse. For over 30 years, he's been mixing up paper for some of the best folders in the world.
Fibers of black.
Like chemists, he and his partner Richard beat abaca and cotton into pulp, along with bright color pigments. When Michael's not making paper, he's in the other half of his studio, folding it into his own wild animals and birds.
The first batch of paper that I made, I was a bit impatient to get to use it, so I took it out of the drying blotters too soon, and it was still slightly damp. I couldn't wait. I started folding it, and then I was able to make these beautiful soft shapes.
Michael is the only origami artist in the world who also makes the medium itself.
We're making paper that's black on one side and yellow on the other because we're making toucan paper. The paper is going to be responsible for me being able to put the right expression in there or not. So, for instance, if it's going to be a fairly complex animal with lots of layers and very thin legs, I'll make a very thin, strong paper. And if it's something like Wilbur, I want a more cushiony, softer paper. No cutting, no paste, no tape. Origami is a metamorphic art form. Sculpture and painting that when you're adding paint to canvas and you're adding clay and welding things together, that's an additive process. When you're chipping away at wood and stone and cutting paper, that's subtractive. Origami, you've got that piece of paper and you don't add to it, you don't take away from it, you change it. Ooh, that's nice. That's going to make beautiful flowers and butterflies. Boy, I look forward to folding that.
Thousands of miles across the Atlantic, in a small farmhouse outside Paris, Michael's good friend Eric Joisel folds paper at his kitchen table. Eric likes to go slow, to stop often, have a coffee, and let his ideas brew in his mind.
I say, yes. Oh! I want to produce a human face, where this and this could be the two eyes and the beginning of the nose. So let's continue a few number of quizzes just to see. Here it is. I need the bottom of the nose. There's two inside reverse for those who practice paper foldings. That's very easy. And then you get it, yeah? The most important is to breathe life into the paper. Origami was so extraordinary, so magic, that I completely stopped any type of sculpture I have done before. I've thrown to the trash everything. I think I don't have anything. And I start origami. It's really crazy, and I often reflect when it's possible to me, with my little brain, to reflect why I choose origami. I'm definitely a masochist, certainly, or a mad man, but of course I'm French.
In the past few years, Eric has been spending more and more time folding people, their faces and forms, in an almost caricature-like style.
Here you have violinists, and the two corners here are supposed to become the two shoes or 2 feet. And here, because I want 5 fingers, I need 8 pleats like that. And because I want a long hat, I need this form with detail of the face. So this is the basic idea. And after that, you fold it and you obtain something like that. So now I have the base. The real origami part of the work is quite finished now. But after that, you can obtain, by example, this one, which is exactly the same, just modeling. And, well, this is challenging for different reasons, because as you can see on the cruise pattern, the center of the square became the face. So, of course, it's not really easy, especially if you work three-dimensional. It's fully close. So it's very difficult. Even myself, I'm not able to produce a copy.
Eric never creates the same piece twice, improvising in a way that he likens to jazz.
Modeling this took me 30 years, and teaching that to somebody else is teaching 30 years of my life.
But most origami is less jazz and more like a sonata or a fugue, repeatable and shared with others through diagrams, who then bring it to life once again. And all across the world, people do just that. Come together to teach and learn new models and see what designers like Robert Lang are coming up with.
We are at the collapse. Y'all see that?
Robert is a master of detail, staggering detail.
Sort of wedge.
For decades, he's been making origami so technical that even with instructions, only the most nimble fingers can actually fold it.
Yeah, one side is higher than the other one. Origami was a passion throughout the years of being a physicist. But the idea that you would take a successful career, a Caltech education, 2 Caltech degrees, and chuck it in the bin for what? For paper folding, for manipulating, little bits of paper. That it seemed like, most people in the world would hear doing that and just say, you are out of your mind. But I'm having the best fun I've had in my life.
You think it's cool to be crazy, I say. Born rich, stay rich, there's no point taking chances.
Most of the reaction is, that's amazing, that's so incredible, I had no idea that was possible. I try to be fairly realistic. Now, usually that means if it's an insect with long, skinny legs, I want it to have long, skinny legs. If it's a bird, I want it to have the proportions and shape. Now, to achieve that realism, it doesn't come by accident. You don't find that by trial and error. You have to work pretty hard to get that detail in. And so I use mathematical and geometric ideas to achieve this goal of a beautiful folded shape.
Robert takes the analogy to music even further to help talk about his work. He even names his pieces by opus number.
What you can accomplish is strongly governed by mathematical laws. In music, the harmonic ratios between the notes and rhythms, and in origami, the laws of paper.
One square, 3 different folders. They each looked back on where some of their early inspiration came from.
Yoshizawa
sensei.
Paper first became sculpture in the hands of a single man in Japan. A self-taught man ahead of his time. Akira Yoshizawa abandoned a factory job to devote his life to interpreting the world in paper. Children had done origami for centuries, making simple animals and toys from basic shapes. But Yoshizawa found a way to make paper come alive. At times, his work even looks like it's about to breathe. Yoshizawa was the first to keep his paper moist while working, a way of sculpting known today as wet folding. And he invented the system of diagramming using just pictures alone, seen in origami books ever since. Throughout his life, Yoshizawa created over 50,000 models, and yet he never sold a single one. Instead, he made ends meet by working odd jobs and even selling soup door to door. More than anything else, he simply wished to see origami recognized as art and to share his love for paper folding with others.
Back in the 50s and 60s, very few people knew of anything beyond a simple flapping bird. Yoshizawa, his seed fell on fertile ground. One very crude measure of the complexity of a figure is how many steps did it take to diagram. And back in the 60s, 20 to 30 was the norm. In the 80s, you saw diagrams that got up to 70, 80, 90 steps. Now, there are figures that take 200 or 300 steps. And so it would not surprise me in 10 years to see an origami design that takes 1,000 steps to fold all the way from start to finish. During the 90s, there was a worldwide informal competition that has been called the Bug Wars. One person would fold a really accurate beetle, and they'd take it to a convention and show, here's my beetle. And people would say, how can I top that? And so the next year, it'd come back, well, here's my spider. Your beetle had 6 legs, but my spider has 8 legs. Well, then the next year, here's my scorpion. It's got 8 legs, but it's also got claws. And this went on and on. Each year, people trying to top the next guy. I see teenagers who are designing their own origami, and they've only been folding for 3 or 4 years, but they've zoomed through 3 decades of origami evolution. What these kids are going to be doing in 5 or 10 years are things that none of us now envisioned were even possible.
This is the seal of MIT, Men's and Bonus, Mind and Hands. This is the blacksmith with his hammer and an anvil. He's sort of the practical side of engineering, and on the other side you have the scholar with the book, and he's the more theoretical side of engineers.
This dragon is made from one piece with no gut.
How far can we push it? What are the limits, the physical limits of this art form?
You can do anything you want.
People are starting to use mathematical terminology to describe paper.
Computer algorithms.
Algorithms, ideal proportion.
Reverse folds.
Complex. More complex.
Very, very complex.
Extremely complex.
I think I'm a little bit afraid. For me, the problem with the young generation is to decide that there is a level where you need to say stop to the challenge of the technique and more complex. That's a problem. So, by example, I have the stupid idea recently to have pockets here, and I make I don't know if I have it, perhaps. I have. Sorry, I had pockets. That's easy to have pockets with a twist, but this is so boring, you know, and had so many thickness inside that this is stupid. You need to stop.
You know, we need technique to create art, and the more technically facile you are with your art, the more eloquent you can be. That's true with writing, singing, anything. But that's just the underpinnings.
If technique evolve and get better and better, that's marvelous. The problem is more and more a human has a potential of energy. If you the part of energy you give to the pure technique, you remote it from emotional things.
Well, that may happen, but that's a phase you just have to get through. You might have to go through the phase of no emotion to get to the next level that lies beyond. And if I can offer an analogy, people throughout music created studies that were just technical exercises to work on fingering or to display certain patterns. And Chopin wrote a whole series of these studies. Of course, the French word for study is étude, and Chopin's études are now considered beautiful artistic works. And the techniques that he demonstrated in his études have now been incorporated into the arsenal of musical composers, and it brings you something like a Rachmaninoff piano concerto, which is fantastically technical and achingly gorgeous music. And while I don't see origami people as yet being Rachmaninoff, that's something we can aspire to, and we can follow that path of exploring a technique, developing it, then using it as a tool to create art. And ultimately, art with incredible emotional content.
And it seems the push and pull of ideas about art over the centuries are all happening at once in this young art form right before our eyes.
As I get older and older, I find that the big task is to put more white canvas in my work, to not play too many notes in music, to start to say, what do I not want to put in this figure, and try and reduce it down to just a few lines and essences of what it is. And that's a much tougher challenge to me than trying to make something much more representational.
I find that I fold more simply now, more expressively than ever before. more abstractly. And I think also much more of my emotional voice shows up in my current work, if you compare it to my younger work.
Yes, I think I will get more and more old. I will take out the technique and just keep emotional things with the paper.
The one crease started more than 20 years ago when one of my students at the college where I was teaching said to me that we're doing a lot of folding, but what can you do with one fold? So I said, well, nothing really. You just make one fold, but you need to make others, to progress the sequence, to make something worth having. But then I thought about it and just began to experiment a little bit and realised that actually you can do a lot with one fold. So normally when you're doing origami, you would just ignore this and pass on to other things. But if you now sort of break the fold in the middle, just pop, and then bring the two sides together, and then hold it, there you've got a shape that's very complicated, but I think quite interesting. And it's just one fold. You can play with this quite a lot to get all kinds of interesting shapes. And this is the lesson, I think, of one crease, that you don't need to have a very strong knowledge of origami technique to be able to make something beautiful that you feel is in some way significant and interesting.
Perhaps the second lesson is just how freeing creative limits can sometimes be, like Picasso, who at times only painted with one color.
As origami people, most of them really don't like these, because again, what do you measure it against? Lots of people talk about the reality of say an elephant in origami. Does it look real? Does it look like an elephant? But it's a piece of paper. Of course it can't look like an elephant, but people measure the detail, they measure the proportions to the real elephant to see if it's good or bad. And if it's got really, really long, spindly legs, it can't be a good elephant. If it's got huge, huge, huge ears or just 3 legs or something, it can't be a good elephant. So elephants with 4 legs are better than elephants with 3 legs. And this is not just a problem in origami, it's also a problem in painting, for example. You see a painting by sort of Mondrian or something, just coloured squares and black lines, and is that better than a, say, painting of flowers? For many people it's not. And it's the same in origami, that they would prefer to see an origami elephant than an origami... I think paper has a problem. I think it's very passive. I think a lot of origami looks trivial, because I think a lot of paper looks trivial. So the pleating came from a sort of discovery that I could make these pleated ribs. I just started playing, and one day somehow these began to emerge. But the problem with them was that they looked a bit weak when they were just ordinary paper. The process of making is the point of it. The object looks good if the process felt good. This needs to be a kind of ballet. And that's what I try to do with my work, to take it to an edge of something, because that's always where the interesting things happen.
And like Paul, more folders are working on the edge, going beyond representationalism into realms of abstraction, pattern, and organicism. On a quiet street near Chicago's Chinatown, material artist Chris Palmer works long days and nights, his bed thrown in the corner and the hours marked by visits from the local squirrels. Years ago, Chris lived in the caves of Granada, and he fell in love with the intricate zillage patterns of the Alhambra as they shifted in the crossing sun. And ever since, Chris has been making patterns in paper that change with movement and light.
A simple composition is like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. As a simple melody, a little bit of structure, not a lot going on. Can be very elegant and nice, but simple. So like in the world of patterns, a hexagon grid or a triangular grid is kind of like those real simple melodies. There's something about the plane and that there's only so many ways that you're going to push and pull it around. That constraint is quite different from other mediums. There's no carving in wood or in stone or knots on a rug that are going to look anything near like what pleats do when they express a line. There's a kind of way that you're coming from nothing to something. Now I'm going to turn it over and do it again. So I have to take this apart, and then I have to rearrange, and it actually that kind of looks like I'm not going to do it for the most of the time until I do it, because I'm just getting it ready to do it. The funny thing is that it always feels awkward, like it's not going to work. I'm folding something on something that's already folded, and then I'm rearranging it and putting it back in a different position where some things are released that were trapped inside. This is one of those parts that always people get hesitant about. It's only good at the end of this process. See, the middle, you saw all the stress in there, and it was like, and then it like, okay, you have to go right through that and not stop in the middle there, because then it's really unhappy. That middle part, I'm not going to be drawing that anytime soon. Yeah. Yes, you try to strive for the final thing being good, but you're also very well aware of how beautiful the process is. People in a gallery or in the public they're missing 2/3 of what's special about what that object was and how it got made.
Fine work there. That came out pretty good.
There's many forms that I rejected and said, oh, that one doesn't have a nice enough form, and then they just kind of go into this pile, like I have boxes of rejected stuffs.
There's the tower, and there's the flower. And then back again.
The petals of a flower aren't perfect. They're pretty regular around. They all have basically the same shape, but the kind of organic element creeps into it. The thing about this that is interesting is that all these planes would go in one plane if there was no dimension to paper. If it was an ideal Euclidean plane, this would all lay flat. And every single one of these, all these little polygons heaped on each other and connected, and the plane would just be in one plane. But then it can stand. Even though it's not good to do this many, many times, it does come apart pretty easily. Like that.
Pas assez de souffle, hein? C'est étrange, là.
Ouais. C'est surnaturel.
C'est bon, là.
Ah, il se retourne bien, là. Il y a une...
This is Vincent Floderer. He's part of an avant-garde group of artists in France, abandoning the imposition of order.
Le navire dans la tempête.
They call themselves Les Crumps. And instead of folding along certain lines, they crumple the paper freely. And from chaos, their work is born. By installing their art in the sun and the wind and rain, it seems they're inviting us to consider art and nature and the evolution of things, perhaps even the life cycle of paper itself. Every few years, a small group of about 200 academics gathers to discuss origami. They're folders of a different kind, and their primary interest is not in making something to look at as art. Instead, they're physicists, computer scientists, biologists, and mathematicians, and they've grown into a small international group of free thinkers, focusing their work on origami. Miri Golan has developed an origami math program reaching out to kids across the entire country of Israel.
The origami is the work of my life.
Every week, 10,000 kids study origametria, geometry, and origami in school. And we have about 40 teachers, Arab and Israeli, who teach it all over Israel. It's very hard to explain geometry because it's a bit abstract to the kids. And the origami make the geometry much more visual. You know, children who can understand and they are good in math, they don't need me. They get it. It's always in every class few kids that it's very hard for them to understand and the abstract and to understand the three dimension and the logic and the fail. And this is the kids who appeal to me, and the origametria make them to understand it. The children like it. And they don't think about, oh, I learned geometry, it's boring and all this. They're just folding and playing and smiling. And what it's doing happiness.
So what kind of things are you thinking here?
Well, I got it online and stuff. I don't know how much fun is in here.
Okay. Well, remember, origami is just such a great way to get your hands dirty with math. You know, it becomes your laboratory for doing mathematics. But if you're going to get the negative curvature...
Tom Hull is the kind of teacher we all wish we had. He makes math beautiful to look at.
You only need 3 colors. This is 810 little pieces of paper. Making an origami model is, at heart, an engineering problem. Like, how do I get the paper to do this? And so people who are interested in learning how things work, how the universe works, how nature works, would also be interested in seeing how a piece of paper works when you fold it up. This is one of the most simple but surprising origami models. This is one big square piece of paper, and as I expand this, you can kind of see it's nothing but concentric squares. This is just a big piece of paper, and all I've done is folded lots of concentric squares in it. The amazing thing is, when you collapse them all down, it wants to form this geometric surface, which we believe is representing something called a hyperbolic paraboloid, which is something you study in Calc 3. This is kind of a neat model. It's folded from one piece of paper. Looks like somehow I took the paper and put more of it in there, you know, so that it can twist around like this. But what's neat about it is that it's still a flat model. It's still something you can fold flat, completely. There are still a lot of people, a lot of mathematicians who, when they hear of origami math, they think, oh, that's just recreational math. That's not serious math. This is something called a Miura math fold. It's this neat. I distinctly remember being 10 years old and having done origami for a few years. And at some point taking a model of a bird or whatever that I just folded and unfolding the whole thing and looking at the crease pattern and thinking, wow, look at these lines. There's something going on here. There's some pattern. There's some rules. I don't know what they are, but there's something going on here. And I always thought, oh, it's got to be geometry. But as you learn more mathematics, you learn how math isn't just this subject, that subject, that subject. It's all tied together. And origami actually exhibits that. You can do everything from geometry, which makes sense, but also number theory and abstract algebra and linear algebra with matrices and weird, bizarre geometry, like geometry of the sphere and stuff like that. That, I think, surprises them because that's not what you would expect. And then you could mush that through the 4th dimension, okay? Well, this isn't just compartmentalized math. This is all of math that can be wrapped together in some weird ways.
At MIT in Cambridge, the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory stands on campus like a monument to form and function. And here, you'll find Eric Demain, the top origami theorist in the world. And when he's not blowing glass, building furniture from used books, or deconstructing the card game of Uno, he's finding creative ways to use folding to solve problems.
Well, when I started my PhD, I was working in an area called computational geometry, which is trying to solve geometric problems with a computer. and I needed some problems to try to solve. I heard a talk about Robert Lang's work in how to design origami with a computer, and I thought, oh, that sounds pretty cool. Maybe there's some other geometric problems coming out of paper folding.
Though Eric doesn't find it relevant, he started college when he was just 12 years old and got his PhD at 20. He was then hired as the youngest professor ever at MIT. 2 years later, he won the MacArthur Genius Award for his research in folding.
It took me a while to realize how magic this is. I like to call this self-folding origami, because you do essentially nothing. You just put in a few creases, and then the paper just wants to fold itself. When you put in a crease in a piece of paper, you're essentially changing the memory in that piece. If I try to unfold it, it will go back to the crease angle that I set it to. I'm essentially changing the memory of the paper. So along here, the paper is trying to stay straight. And along the creases, it's trying to stay bent at the angle that I creased it to. And this is the right answer. Physics finds that for you. And it makes these really cool shapes.
Eric has always worked closely with his father, Marty, a sculptor, self-taught computer scientist, and avid puzzle maker. Marty homeschooled Eric as a single parent, and they've been making and doing puzzles ever since Eric could talk. A few years ago, they found the solution to a famous folding puzzle that intrigued both mathematicians and magicians for decades. It also eluded Marty when he tried to solve it by himself.
I had worked on a problem years ago, and it was this fold and cut problem, and I failed. Put in a lot of hours on this problem, folding paper and cutting and opening up and going, wow, that's cool, but not knowing what it meant.
So the problem is you take a piece of paper, you fold it however you want, but it should end up flat. And then you take your scissors, you make one complete straight cut, and then unfold the pieces. And the question is, what shapes can you get by that process? So here's a simple example. I'll open it up this time. Showing the answer. You have a rectangle of paper. You're allowed to fold it however you like, as long as it ends up flat. Take your scissors. You make one complete straight cut. I tend to work on whatever interests me, whatever I find fun and interesting, not necessarily useful or applied. I mean, some things end up being useful, but it's sort of by accident or coincidence, not because I'm aiming to be useful. I'm driven by the mathematics, not the applications. That's another thing to see which ones are not. In the beginning, we didn't know what would be possible, but then we tried to push the limits and eventually found that everything could be made. You can make any shape that you want made out of straight sides just by folding one straight cut. The solution to the fold and cut problem was really a long process. When you solve a problem, it's this amazing sort of epiphany, this big excitement that, wow, we finally solved it. Usually you're wrong. Usually you didn't solve it, but you find you say, okay, immediately you question yourself. Okay, so there's this brief moment you say, oh, I think we've got it. This is so beautiful.
Any problem you solve research-wise, any sculpture you build, you have this epiphany, this moment that you feel just like a Superman in some sense, and you want more of those moments.
I mean, as a mathematician, I guess the downside is as soon as you solve one problem, you go on to the next one. Okay, how can we generalize this? What bigger problem can we solve? And it goes on.
And as bigger problems keep coming up, the work of Eric and Marty, along with others like Tom Hall and Robert Lang, has had some unexpected results.
It turns out that this fold and one cut problem comes up like in Robert Lang's stuff. I mean, it has lots of connections to actual origami folding. It even has connections to airbag folding. There you have some three-dimensional airbag. You want to collapse it flat so that all of the boundary surfaces of the airbag collapse to a common plane. This is sort of the lower dimensional problem where you want to take all these edges down to a line.
Whenever there's a need in the industry to take a flat sheet and somehow make it smaller, there is a potential for origami to have an application. In airbags, designers want to do as much design as they can through computer simulation. Because the only way to test an airbag for real is to go crash a car. But how do you simulate that process in a computer? It turns out that there is an algorithm for flattening that they use, and that algorithm came from the design of artistic origami. I had no idea that there would be a practical application. But this often happens in the sciences, that things that were developed for mathematical or aesthetic reasons then turn around and have a real application.
Interest in origami has also sprung up in medicine and biology, natural science and nanotechnology, and even space. Here's Robert in front of a scale version of a foldable satellite lens, which he designed to fit into a rocket and then unfurl once in orbit. And Eric has recently made headlines with his work on the idea of folding human proteins to fight certain diseases.
You look really close at any living thing, deep in there, there's lots of little proteins running around making life happen. And every protein folds into pretty much one shape. Usually when your proteins fold in the wrong way into something they're not supposed to fold into, you get some disease like Alzheimer's or mad cow disease or something. We don't know very much about this process. In particular, we can't really watch it happen because it happens fast and it happens small. And if you watch it happen, it's like the quantum physics, right? If you watch it happen, it won't happen the right way. So the hope is that by developing a mathematical model like this of how proteins can fold, we can design synthetically a protein that is useful, say, in the drug world. Maybe this shape of protein is really good because it will bind and attack the AIDS virus, but it won't bind to the human, so it won't kill the host. And so if we can solve protein folding, we can design custom drugs that will fight particular viruses.
In science, this is the most creative you can be. We are artists whether we do science or whether we build sculpture. It's both the same.
What keeps you interested? What gets you out of bed every morning?
It's fun. I keep doing this because it's fun. I think there'd be no other reason. Well, there are other reasons, but I wouldn't do it unless it were fun, unless it stayed fun. And that's pretty much my philosophy of life. I blow glass because it's fun. I do improv comedy because it's fun. I fold paper because it's fun. Initially I did it because it was the mathematics was fun. Now, when I get time, I fold paper because actually folding paper is fun. That's the driving force. It's maybe a bit personal, but I think everyone should do something they find fun.
In the end, it seems artists and scientists are not as different as we often think, both creating interpretations of the very same world around us, the world we all share. And to most, the real beauty of origami lies in its simplicity, allowing everyone to create their interpretation of the world in paper.
Visit the Independent Lens website to learn more about these modern-day paper folders. Get an inside look at independent film in Inside Indies and share your thoughts in Talkback online at pbs.org. Coming to Independent Lens. A priest in Massachusetts' poorest city is determined to include the cultures of its diverse parishioners, but some are skeptical.
If the Mass is done in Spanish and English, I do not get anything out of the Mass.
Quickest blessing ever.
A 4-year look at a church in transition. Scenes from a parish. This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.